Welcome to Highline Excel class number 5. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel and click on my college website link and you can download this workbook. Otherwise, if you're in the class, you can get this from our week 1 website. Hey, this is the high-speed review of basics before we go on to intermediate and advanced stuff. And we're going to talk a little bit about charts. Now here we have some units and sales and cost of goods sold. And we would like to compare actually sales, cost of goods sold, one type of expense, and fixed cost another on a chart. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to use an XY scatter diagram, which when you use an XY scatter diagram, you have an x-axis variable. This is the horizontal variable, and these are the vertical or y. So the way we're going to do this is here's our x's. And the x's always need to be to the left when you're using pretty much any chart. I'm going to highlight sales, cost of goods sold, and fixed costs. The chart wizard will know that these are the x's and that these should all be y's. Now in 2007, you have to go up to the insert menu, and then there's a scatter diagram. Now you could select one of these, but you could also plop a line on top of it. Now this is not a line chart. A line chart has categories like labels across the horizontal axis, and then you go up the y-axis or vertical axis a certain distance. This is an xy. You go out the x a certain distance and up the y a certain distance. So both axes matter. This is a 2-variable chart. I'm going to select this one right here. Whoa, look at that. Just like that, we get a pretty good chart. Here's the fixed costs, always the same no matter what units we have. Here's a little legend over here. Let's see how to mess around with this chart and make it look a little bit better. I'm going to right-click the legend and point to Format Legend, and then Show at Top. And then click Close. Any of these elements you can right-click and point to Format. Hey, what about this axis right here? I'm going to right-click. Format Axis instead of Legend. It says Format Axis. And I'm going to click on Number, and I'm going to select only 0 here, and maybe just 0 decimal places, and then click Close. So that gives us a little bit more room. I'm going to do the same thing here. Click on the axis. Now, we were right-clicking Format Legend, but that's really the long way. The way you want to do it, just like the cells. Control 1 is Format Cells when you're in the cells. We can use Control 1. And it gets us to whatever the format element is. Then we don't have to go hunting for it. Now I want to do the same thing, number, and change this to 0. And then there's a close right here. The last thing I want to do is make sure I can tell what's on these axes. You know, I don't know if this is money or units. I don't know if this is money or units. So I'm going to click here, Control 1, and change the number to currency with 0. How about that? And then click Close. Finally, over here, we can't really indicate units. So what we're going to do is add a label to this axis. Layout. Go to Data, Axis Titles, because we want the horizontal. Zip, and below. And I'm simply going to type units. All right, and the legend at the top sort of serves as a chart title. So that's a little bit of how to do charts. Let's go over and look at a few other charts. I want to do a pie chart. When do you use pie? When you're comparing the parts to the whole. Hey, what about the total sales right here for toys, boomerangs, and kites? Each one of these is a part. When you add them all up, you get the 87,000. Now, when you're doing a pie chart, you do not highlight the total. Now, I need this and the label, so I'm going to hold my Control key. Then now I've highlighted the labels and the numbers. Go up to Insert, but this time I'm going to select Pie. Why is it not such a good idea to select the pies that are tilting the 3-dimensional? Because anytime you do that, by definition, it's distorting the proportion. Now sometimes if the differences aren't too big or whatever, it's not tilted too much, that's fine. But I like to do the flat ones because then it perfectly defines it. Well, that's what I do there. I'm going to click Delete. I'm going to highlight these, OK, and then hold Control on these. Now let's try it again. Insert, Pie, and then Pie. So there it is. Now I'm going to get rid of this legend, and watch this. We can go up to the Layout, and go to Data Labels. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. Now, right now it's got the value, but let's do the percentage and the category name. So look at that. Just beautiful. And then click Close. One last thing, how about a title at the top? I have no idea what this is. Now I want to scoot this out of the way. Notice we have a title already for this in the cells, and it's in, oops, Control Z. And it's in A16 right there. So watch this. We're going to go up to Layout, Chart Title, and say Above. And now I want to show you how to link a title to a cell. The key is you hit the F2 key. Notice the cursor's flashing there. Then type equals and click in A16. You can see that formula and enter. Sure enough, now it changes. And the charts are, of course, like everything else in Excel. If you change this into, let's just say, win sales, that's the name of the, oh, look at that. That changes. And let's say we change this to 5,000. Everything changes in the charts. Now, that's a pie chart. What about a column chart? There's a great keyboard shortcut for column. And column is great. You can compare the difference between elements or across a category. Now, here we have 3 separate toy boomerangs and kites for each January. So we can get multiple columns to show up for each January, each February, each March. The key to this setup is you have category labels there and here. So yeah, these are actually the category labels. These are not really categories. These are the name. That toy is the name of those data points or data series. But here you have some labels here and data inside the table. Cross tabulation. You can simply, instead of going to Insert Column, you can use the keyboard shortcut F11. And this works in all versions. Now watch what happens. It'll create a whole chart on a sheet just like that. Boop. I'm going to go back over here. There's a new keyboard shortcut in 2007, Alt F1, and it creates the column chart right on the sheet. Look at that. Just like that, we have a pretty excellent chart. We have our legend, which says which columns these are, our labels here, and our amounts. We'll leave that one. We can mess around with that one some more. Now I want to show you a bar chart. Okay, a bar chart. Bar charts are similar to column charts, except for they're horizontal. And when you really want to compare differences, I like to go with a bar chart. I'm going to go like this. Notice it plopped up the same things, except for the labels are on this axis here, category labels. And our legend with the name, that green kite name is the name of this data series. That's a column, a visual column representing a number, representing a number, representing a number. Notice if you point to them, you can see a little screen tip. So when you're comparing differences, sometimes the horizontal bar chart works good. Let me show you another option. Notice with this chart, the 3 bars are together. But all of these actually add up to the amount for March. Whoops. So if I click and drag this out of the way, notice how we have, I'm going to Control Z. I actually messed that chart up. Notice how for March, right, there's a total. I'm going to show you a bar chart, which will actually show you the individual parts that add up to the total. And this is called a stacked bar. There's also a stacked column. So I'm going to highlight this same data right here. Go to Insert and Bar. Oh, a stacked bar. And you can see the little indication. Boop. Now, one thing that's nice about a stacked bar is what if you could have the numbers right inside? You can right-click and point to Add Data Labels. And there it is. Right-click, Add Data Labels. Right-click, Add Data Labels. And sure enough, you see now that one's kind of messed up. Maybe we'd have to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe we wouldn't want them because of that right there. But there it is. That's a stacked bar. You get to see the relationship. This red one is bigger than both of these red ones. I'm going to Control Z. I don't like those numbers because they just overlap. You can see this one in March, the blue is much bigger. What is the blue? The toys. So the toys sales for March was much bigger. But you also get to see that March total, overall total, was much bigger. And these 2 months were just about the same. So that's a stacked bar. The final one we want to look at here is a line chart. Just a moment ago, we looked at a scatter diagram, which was 2 variables. Let's look at a line chart. all I want to do is compare the total sales for February, January, and March. So I'm going to highlight this right here and hold Control and highlight these. Now I'm going to go to Insert. Notice there's some category labels and then a number. So on the horizontal axis, we will simply have some categories that are equidistant. And then here, the y-axis will show our up and down for these numbers. Insert, Line, and I'm going to select this one right here. Now, we only have 2 data points, so it's not very exciting, right? Get rid of that because we don't need that at all. We do need a title for this, so I'm going to go up to Layout, Axis Title, Horizontal. Oh, I'm sorry. We want a chart. Our axis labels, we can add some dollar signs to this because then we know it's dollars. We don't have to add a label to that axis. Maybe currency. Close. And this one, that's self-evident, January, February, March. The only thing we need left for this, I'm actually going to point to the edge here and hold Shift and click and drag in to make it a little bit smaller. The only thing we need left is a title, so I'm going to go out to Layout and Chart Title up at the above. Boop. And I'm going to do our same trick, F2 =, and then click on that A16, Enter. So Wind Sales. You know, this is really the name of this company is Into the Wind. I love that. That label is linked to that cell. All right, so those are a bunch of charts and why you might use them. One last chart just to show you that you can put 2 different types of charts together. We actually have some total sales and expenses, and I want a column for this and a line for expenses. So I'm going to highlight this whole table. Notice it's the same situation, some series names or labels here and some category labels here with a blank up in this corner. And numbers, this is a cross tabulation without the totals. Highlight that, and I'm going to go up and actually use my keyboard shortcut for column, Alt F1. Now, the trick here is that we have all columns. But how in the world could we change one of them to a line? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You got to select, and sometimes it's hard to select chart elements. I had to click in a couple times. You can use your arrow keys to toggle through the different. Once you select the chart, you can use your arrow keys to toggle through. And see, I got the axis, the horizontal lines there. But once I get the red ones, that's the total expense. I want to change that to a line. I could go up to Design, Ribbon, and change chart type. The other way is if you can get to it, you could right-click. Kind of hard. You know there's a right-click key. The right-click key is on the right side. It's below Enter, Shift, and it's in between the Window key and Control, the right-click key. And then you could change series chart type. Boop. And we're going to change it to a line. We'll change it with some markers for the points. And just like that, you can see, oh, our expenses. I'm going to right-click this and put it at the top. I could have Control 1. All right, so now you can kind of see there's the column represents our total sales, and the expenses are the line. All right, so a couple more topics before we finish up our review. Page setup. Page setup. I have a big amortization table here. And over here, instead of notes, I have pictures of the page setup dialog boxes. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to actually highlight this whole amortization table. I'm going to click the first couple rows and then Control-Shift down arrow. Whoa, that's a big table. All right, and then I'm going to grab my scroll and come back up. I'm going to set the print area because I don't want these notes to print out when I actually go to print out, nor do I want these assumptions. So I'm going to go to Page Layout, Print Area, Set Print Area. Boop, just like that. That set the print area. That area I have highlighted are the only areas that will print out. Now I want to go to Page Layout. Now, Page Setup, you can bunch of options up in the ribbon, but that's a dialog launcher. And there it is, the Page Setup dialog box. This has everything, and it's sometimes much more efficient than continually clicking back in the ribbon and getting all these different tabs. Now I'm going to show you the keyboard shortcut for this. Earlier, we talked about the keyboard shortcuts, but I want to show you Alt keys. If you hit the Alt key, notice a P comes up for page layout. So then I'm going to hit P. Notice the page layout ribbon comes up. And notice the dialog launcher has an SP. So if you hit SP, that comes up. Now, the first 10 times you do it, you kind of have to look at the little screen tips. But after a while, you just go Alt PSP. I guess not. Alt PSP. I think I hit O. No, I didn't. I hit P and then something else. Now, for us, we would want portrait. And guess what? This is a huge sheet with 361 rows. So I want to fit to 1 page wide. That means no matter how wide it gets, it'll always fit it to just the wideness to 1 page. But I don't know how many pages. So instead of putting 1 or 10 or 15 or guessing, you leave it blank. If you put a 0 there, it won't print tall at all. You just leave it blank, and that's a super cool trick for gigantic, tall spreadsheets. It'll just keep printing always 1 page wide until it gets the last one, and then it will end. Margins, you can mess around with the right, left, bottom, and top if you want, and sometimes you have to. But most of the time, just horizontal will do the trick. Now, headers and footers. I want to add, since there's so many pages, a footer, a built-in one. Notice it says page 1 of question mark. That means 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. So I'm going to click that right there. If you click on the custom footer, you can see the code it put in. Now, I want to create a custom header. Notice there's our preview. Our preview up here, and there's a preview right there. We don't want a built-in one, and there's no preview, so we go to custom. Boop, and here we're going to type your name. So you can type something in to the left section. The center section, I want to actually put the file name. Notice in 2007, you see screen tips when you point to these little icons. In earlier versions, you didn't. You'd have to figure out what they were by yourself. I'm going to type a space, a dash, and a space, and then put Sheet tab. So now it'll always, no matter how many times we change the file name or the Sheet tab name, it'll always print those out. Finally, I want the date here. So I've filled up 1, 2, 3 sections. Click OK. Click OK. Actually, we have one more thing. I forgot the last tab, Alt PSP. Oh, this awesome tab right here. Notice we set the print area right here already by using that set print area, but you could have manually done it here. And since we actually have a couple other things to do here too, it might have been faster to do that. Notice you can kind of see a dotted line there. That means that's the print area. The only thing is, when we print this out, I want these labels at the top to be at the top of every page. Whoa, rows to repeat at top. I'm going to click in there and then click on row 7. Some of these other things we don't need right now. Columns, you could do columns if you wanted to repeat these columns. And in fact, no, we don't need to do that. Click OK. And now let's go to Print Preview. Now, the Print Preview is print here on the orb and then Print Preview. The keyboard shortcut is Control F2, as you can see there. Control F2. And sure enough, oops, Control F2. And there we have it. You can see it's got the header at the top. And at the bottom, it has the page number. When I go to Next, you can see now it's still got the stuff at the top, and it's got the next bit of data from the second page, and it's got the headers at the top. And sure enough, at the bottom now, I went to page 3 of 3. So that's page setup. Very important. I'm going to click Escape. One last topic, and we're not going to really go into this topic too much in the basics series and basics class. We touched on this. We'll talk about this much more in this advanced class. I want to talk a little bit about data analysis, but the most important thing about data analysis, your data's got to be set up correctly. In order to do sort, filter, subtotals, and pivot tables, you've got to have your field names at the top, field names, and then records are in rows. So you can see here's one sale, right, on 210, region west. Shunting sold to the Economist. Here's the product. Here was the cost of goods sold and sales. On 4-3, Suzanne M. sold to the Midwest. In the Midwest region, Costco, and there's the item and the sales. So Records are in rows, field names at the top, and no spaces. If you have an individual space, that's OK. But what you don't want is this. If you do this, then your data analysis won't work because the data won't be connected. I'm going to Control Z. Now, how do you sort? I'm going to, in 2007, you can right-click and point to Sort. In earlier versions, there's Sort buttons, or you have to go, in this version, to that button right there, or the Data. So Data ribbon, and in earlier versions, it was the Data menu. And you can click on A to Z. Later in this class, we'll see how to do custom sorts. Notice it immediately sorted it A to Z. Now I'm going to click in this one and go back to Data and click A to Z again. So now what I've done by sorting this column and then this column second, notice, what did I do? Let me Control ZZ. If you didn't notice, what did I do? Did I have to highlight the whole table? No way. Just one cell and then sort. Watch this. If you highlight more than one cell, you get in big trouble. In earlier versions, you get in bigger trouble. But here, at least it's polite. It warns you. It goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you want me to expand the selection to include the whole database, or do you want to continue just this current section? If you do this current section, you will wreck your data set. So click Cancel. The trick is you click in one cell. Data, A to Z. So now, if I scroll down, I can see Midwest is the major sort. I come down here, and then within Midwest, they are sorted alphabetically. So that's sort. The next feature is filter. Go to Data, and you can click on Filter. The keyboard shortcut in this version is Control-Shift-L. Control-Shift-L. Filter adds a little drop down, and not only can you sort, but you can actually filter. Now, before I filter, notice when I sorted, all of the records are still there, right? If I were to filter, let's filter on this field. Let's unselect all and just select Amazon. Notice there's no blue row headers. I'm going to click OK. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of blue row headers, which means rows are hidden. All it did was hide the things and show me the Amazon. Now, to undo that filter, I'm going to come back here and clear. We'll talk more about that later. I'm going to get rid of the filter, go back up to Data, and get rid of this filter. I want to talk about subtotals just briefly. And subtotals, the most important thing about subtotals is if you have to sort first. So I've sorted this region, and I want subtotals, which means I want to add up all the Midwest sales. I go up to Data. And subtotal is, my screen is scrunched up. Subtotal is under Outline and then Subtotal. I screwed it back here. I always have my screen small, so it has a sharper image for the video. There is Subtotal, and it's going to ask you a few questions. Change in. Now, we want subtotals for our sales, right? We want to see the total for Midwest. So the @change in is region. Every time there's a change in the region from Midwest to the next region, I want a subtotal. So I'm going to say region. Use function sum. Oh, and add subtotal too. What? Sales. Click OK. Just like that, I've added subtotals. Now, over here, there's an outline. 3 means I can see all the data. 2 means I can see just the subtotals. So just like that, I've quickly subtotaled, and it did all the heavy lifting for me. I have all my regions and the totals. If I want to see all the data, I click right here. If I want to get rid of the subtotals, which is just totally amazing, I just go back up to Data, Outline, and get rid of subtotal. And then click Remove All. The final brief introduction to our data analysis is pivot tables. Now, pivot tables do the same thing, can do the same thing as a subtotal, but you can get do a lot more. For our brief example, I want to do the same thing. I want subtotals for Midwest. But the pivot table won't do it in the data set. It'll actually import it and put it somewhere else or on a different sheet. I'm going to go up to Data. Oh, but in earlier versions, the pivot tables were on the Data menu, but not in this version. They're in Insert. Insert Pivot Table, and then Pivot Table. Now, in this version, there's only one step. In earlier version, there were 3 steps. It says, where is your data? Because we've set up our data correctly, it guessed right. We want on a new worksheet or this existing worksheet. I'm going to click on this existing worksheet and just select a cell right here, and then click OK. Now what it did, I have to scroll over. In this version, it adds this panel here, and you can actually take whatever region you want and drag it to the row. Remember, or what we'd like here is our regions 1, 2, 3, 4, just as we saw in the subtotal, and then our subtotals here. So we could have 1, 2, 3, 4 regions here and then add it all up here. So that's called a row. This picture here is actually how it looked in earlier versions, 2003. Now, if you want to drop something in a row like a field, right? In earlier versions, you'd click and drag. Notice the cursor moves around. When I see that blue vertical line, that means I'm dropping it in the row. Just like that. It went through all 1,000 records and gave me just one of each. That's a unique list. Now, simply to do the sales, right here, I click and drag to this area right here. See, the blue is in the center box. That means where we're going to add it up. And just like that, we got the same exact answer as the subtotals. I'm going to Control ZZ. In 2007, since sometimes it's tricky to drag over here, you can actually drag your region to the row and then drag your sales to the values. And just like that, you have it. So that is an excellent way. And we'll talk a lot more about pivot tables later. All right, that's the end of our basics review. Next video, we'll start with our intermediate Excel. See you next video.